Have you ever just been waiting for a lead to show up in your CRM or hit the MLS if you have buyers? Well, you have already lost the listing to a bidding war or a tech giant referral fee. So if you're relying on active sellers, it means that you're competing on price and commission rather than expertise. So I'm going to be talking about the Dallas Fort Worth area because that's where I'm at. All of the techniques and strategies I'm talking about today can apply to any market. But in Dallas and Fort Worth, the most profitable listings are the ones that never even hit the open market because the agent identified the distress before the homeowner even before the home sale. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about distressed sellers because there's quite a few different categories, but we're going to be talking about life events that trigger 90% of the probability of someone having to sell their property. So we're going to talk about how to use public data. So it's for free. You can buy lists for this information, but if you're on a budget, you can get this information for free. Positions you as a consultant rather than a salesperson. So most realtors are taught to, scrape the MLS, look for sell signs, take pictures of landlord signs when there's a for rent sign. But what if you could find listings without having to drive around, without having to do cold calling, without just using data that is accessible, but you know how to use it. So in this video, that's what I'm going to be talking about. Now, if you're someone and you're already watching this and you know you need a change, you don't have to wait till the end of this video to call me. You can reach out anytime to call me. Let's get into it. My name is Nancy Wallace-Laabs, and I've been working with distressed sellers since, for almost 20 years now. And what I have found is if you can identify motivated sellers and what I can tell you is if you can identify this group of people that are motivated that need to sell their house, you will have more listings than you know what to do with. So if you've been waiting for that lead to hit your CRM, the MLS, you've already lost. You're already behind the 8 ball. So the old way was you would, put things out on social media and they would just come into your CRM and then you would send them an email or maybe you would do some cold calling. You would compete when you went out and had the listing presentation. You'd be, presenting with every other realtor that was trying to get the listing. And so what are you doing? You're trying to do your own value proposition to help these folks, to tell them how they should price the house, how to stage it, and you're literally fighting over publicly listed inventory. Now, the smarter way to go about doing this is you have to identify sellers that they need to sell even before they know they need to sell. That's kind of what I've built my business on, is finding those motivated sellers through what I call life events. So we're going to be talking about some of those life events today and how you can approach those sellers. So what you're going to learn today is I'm focusing on 3 life triggers and that you'll have some non-obvious signals to look for. But if you find these, what I have found is that if you can identify these sellers before they even know they have to sell, there's a 90% chance that they're going to list and probably sell their house within the next 6 months. So wouldn't it be nice if you were the realtor that was able to get that listing? So there's hidden inventory sources. Now, some of you, if you've been doing this as long as I have, you may already know about them, or maybe you know about them and you've tried to approach them, but, maybe you were just a little off. And, so we're going to talk about how to approach distressed sellers because they're different than, let's say, someone who's just relocating across the country because they have a job offer. Distressed people have a lot more going on in terms of the emotionality of why they need to sell. And sometimes they're not prepared. And that's where you can come in to be more of a consultant and do a consultative sale rather than trying to just come in and do a listing presentation. So the problem first script is what I like to do. So first of all, you have to know what the problem is. So when you're dealing with someone who's in a financial distress, maybe it's through divorce, maybe they're going through foreclosure, maybe it's divorce. I've kind of worked on a lot with pre-probate. This is a group of sellers who have someone has recently passed away and they have not filed probate. And yes, there is such a group of people out there. And yes, they do need your help. So here's my insight. Most realtors, kind of learn the old school way, right? They're like, okay, we look for sale signs as we're driving by. We'll run through the MLS for expireds. How many of you raise your hand or leave a comment if you've ever reached out to expireds or canceled? And I'm saying that, why don't you start looking for life problems? There's a couple things that will always happen, right? So we always have to pay taxes, right? And we always know that people will go through some kind of hardship in their course of their marriage, whether that's illness or that's death. You can be a resource to help those people through those kinds of situations. So you don't have to wait until the end to secure your territory. And what I mean by that is if you already know, oh my gosh, Nancy, I need some help here, you can just reach out and give me a call and I'd be happy to have a 15-minute, consultation with you just to say, hey, do you need a lead source? Or if you're having problems finding these leads or what to say when you reach out to these folks. So here are the three big triggers that I have found in North Texas, in the Dallas DFW area. Again, this could apply to any market, but my specialty is in North Texas. So number one, we have the pre-probate or estate transition. So what do I mean by that? Well, there are people when they pass away, and I know realtors that look at the obituary. Probate information is on. You can go through just I'm going to just say Collin County, Denton County, and you go right to the records online and you can find a lot of information. Now, the thing is, how old is it, right? So pre-probate is a little bit harder because you have to match the property record with the death certificate. But that's kind of been my specialty, and I can show you a really easy way how you do that. But the death certificate, if they own property, there's probably going to be some kind of change with that property. And maybe that changes, they have to sell, maybe one spouse has already passed away. So there's a lot of opportunity, if you will, when that life event happens. Number two is a tired landlord. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of folks, especially after COVID, which was okay 2-3 years ago. But I used to go to eviction court and there's a courthouse close to my house and I would go every Wednesday. And then I would just go there as a networking kind of thing to meet landlords and that are, having to evict their tenant. And you would be amazed at how many landlords might want to sell their property because they're just tired of being in eviction court. I've worked with absentee owners where the property is just set. I'm going to get into how I approach those types of owners as well. And the last one is that tax delinquency, when people become delinquent on their taxes. So there could be a couple things there that could be going into the foreclosure, or they could actually be on the tax late. And then, of course, then there's also the HOA. So, you kind of have to know what your niche is and then how to approach when people are going through these different, there's financial, there's, health hardships, and there's, the final one, which is, dealing with someone who's lost a loved one. Now, there's some specific signals that I look at, right? But I can just tell you this. If I'm working in a special niche, like my niche is working with pre-probate, people who have recently passed away and they have not filed probate. Now, I'm in Texas, so you can buy and sell properties without having to go through probate. You may be in a state that you can't do that. However, you can still market to the folks, right, to the families who have lost a loved one, as long as you've verified that they have real estate that they might need to sell, because you can still be a resource and reach out before they file probate. Why would you want to do that? Well, because you're the first person who's contacted them. And if you approach that family in a certain way, there's a high probability that you're going to be the person that they end up hiring to help them with the sale of their property. Now, I'm just going to give you a little clue here, a tip. If you reach out to that family and just try to list their house and you've not done your research, you didn't approach it in a non-realtor way, if you will, then you're not going to get it. So you have to be able to bring more than value, right? I just was in a call and they were talking about, what's your unique selling proposition? Well, all realtors bring value. And if you're, if we're awake, we should be bringing value. So how is it that you're going to assist these families? What approach can you take when a family is going through a distressed situation? So the distressed part comes where you can identify these potential properties for sale, and you become the resource, the listing agent to get these properties on the market before anyone else. And I just want to talk to you about what I have found over the years. I do work with a lot of different distress situations. So this one happened to be absentee landlord or absentee owners. An absentee owner is just the property's been sitting vacant for years and years and years. So here's what happened. I sent my marketing materials to this particular property owner. That property had been sitting vacant for more than 5 years. So when the person called me, because I do a lot of my marketing and I don't do cold calling because I just do direct mail marketing. And when that person called me, I didn't just start off by, they said, "Oh, I got your materials." And we didn't start talking about the house. We started talking about the history of the house because I knew that it was old. Then I was able to have a discussion about this property. So you can imagine how old the house was. It had been sitting vacant for 5 years, and I was not the first realtor to reach out to this person. This is what we talked about. Our conversation started off about football, and we got around to the history of the home. And I let him talk and tell me about the history of the home, which was that he had been born in the home and that it was his childhood home. And so I said, I thanked him for calling. And I said, I understand that you have an emotional attachment to this home, but did you ever sit down and figure out how much that emotionality was costing you each year? And he said, "What?" And I said, now the house was paid for, but it still had property insurance. It still had property taxes. And as it turned out, he had liens against the property because of the condition of the property. He had complaints from the neighbors. So he was also having to pay the city. So when we kind of put it down on paper, the actual financial cost of not just 1 year, not 2 years, not 3 years, but more than 10 years of where he had been paying for this vacant property, almost a light bulb. We were having the conversation over the phone, but you could almost hear the light bulb through the phone line because no one had ever put it to him like that. They had just come at him like, "Okay, well, you can sell it and you can get this much money for the house." But for him, he had been emotionally attached to it. And so he never really stopped to think about, "Oh, well, every year I could take this money." And that's exactly what we talked about. I said, "Well, if it was costing him about $10,000 a year to keep this vacant home." And I said, "Well, if you had $10,000 extra every year, what would you do with that money?" And that's how we started talking about me listing the house for him. And do you see how I'm still trying to go after the business, but not in more of an indirect way? So that's what I wanted to share with you. So that house had been sitting there. And again, I was not the first realtor that contacted him, but because I didn't approach it as like, "Oh, okay, you need to sell it. Here's what I can list it for. Here's what you can get for it." I took more of an approach of why was he allowing the house to be sitting there for so long? That's really what I wanted to find out. So, as I mentioned, I've been working in the DFW area for quite some time, as maybe some of you. Now, what I wanted to do was kind of break this down into neighborhoods where half of the equation is knowing what to look for, right? But the second part of it is where is the most likelihood that you're going to find that? So you have to do a little market research. And if you're already doing farming and you're looking at areas that you want to, grow your business in, then, you would want to take this information and drill down. So number one, I've looked at B class neighborhoods in and around where I live. So Mesquite, Garland, North Richland Hills. So those are older neighborhoods with older population. So you can easily get all the demographics that you need. So where I live is kind of a newer area, if you will. So there's like newer, there's more, family younger folks that live here. So there's usually high equity, deferred maintenance, and owners who've been living there for a long time. So sometimes people call this, like, marketing to seniors or things like that. But I look at it more as not seniors per se, but a senior neighborhood, if you will. That's what I look at, right? So senior neighborhood. So that would be what I would call like the B class neighborhoods. And I'm going to give you a little tip. You can go into, Chat GPT in your area and just say, do some research or perplexity, do research on what are the B class neighborhoods in the area that I live in or that I want to list properties in. So that's one way you can go about finding that if you're, newer and you don't know how to do that. Then the next thing is out-of-state owners. Now, these lists are easy to pull even from your own MLS. So usually what happens is when the property tax record doesn't match up with the property address. So that right there tells you that that's more than likely a non-owner occupied. So the property could be vacant. It could be a rental. Could be something else, but that's usually the two scenarios. And you can do a whole marketing campaign just to absentee owners or landlords. So you can look up, you can also do a search for, like in our MLS, you can do a search for just rental properties and you can literally search for properties. And I'm going to give you another tip. So when I do those searches, those public record searches, I scrape out any LLCs or like investment houses. What I'm looking for are individual owners of properties that they are not occupying. It's a lot easier to talk with and get the decision maker on one single family home than it is, a an LLC where they might own multiple properties. Doesn't mean that you couldn't do it, but it's just a little bit different approach is all I'm saying. And then you want to look at the 50% equity threshold. So a lot of times what this signals is that one, the seller will, they'll make out pretty good because they have equity in their property and they might not be so hung up on, getting top dollar if they need to sell. So you might be able to approach it more in terms of the cost of holding on to the property and the benefit they would receive if that's what they're looking to do when they sell their home. So it all depends on why they're selling, and that's really what you have to get to. I guess that's kind of the gist of this whole video is that, it's one thing about knowing your neighborhood. It's knowing about, your people skills and how you approach people, but also getting to the bottom of why would the person want to sell? For me, I just want to work with motivated sellers. That's what I do. That's my business model. Because number one, even if you're just listing it, you want someone that's motivated because if you have someone who's, let's say they're just stuck on a price of a house and it's too high and the house is never going to sell at that price, then how best use of your time is that if you're working with a client that won't come down just because you throw their house up on the market and you're hoping that they'll have, price cuts and price reduction, that doesn't really help you to move your business in a more positive, income producing way. That's kind of what I'm getting at there. So I really like to go after people that there's not a lot of competition to, right? And so what I do is I don't take the traditional routes to market. I market to more like what you'll see here. This is kind of a map, what I call my opportunity map in the DFW area. So I am looking for those older neighborhoods with the older homes that have a lot of deferred maintenance. And here's why. I do have a big investor client pool that I sell to. So a lot of what I can offer distressed sellers is one that they don't have to fix the house up, right? They don't have to, parlay, they don't have to spend a lot of money, fixing their house up to still get top dollar. If you have a seller, for example, let's say they're a hoarder and it's going to take about $50,000. This actually happened. Now let's talk about opportunity mapping. This is what I like to do. I like to go where I feel like the highest probability of me getting a motivated seller that I can move the property fairly quickly. And I'm going to just map it out. So I'm going to use my demographics to go into areas like, Mesquite and Garland in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's suburbs where they have older homes and the price point is not as high. I mean, it's usually you're not going to have, I don't have a lot of, I'm not a luxury listing agent. So I'm going after kind of more mid-range, first-time homeowner type of properties, maybe a little bit higher. um, North Richland Hills, it's very blue collar right now as I'm recording this. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of like the types of housing that I could look at there in the single family spiel, like from 2 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. Some have garage, some don't. So depending on my buyer's list, I can go in there and I can start talking with sellers and I can approach them with different marketing aspects of the cost of them holding on to their home, because in depending on the market, like right now we're in a market where homes are sitting on the market a little bit longer, so I have a little bit more leeway when I'm talking to the sellers about, hey, you can hold out for another 10, 15, $20,000, but then what's it really costing you? Maybe they want to move out of state, maybe they're trying to move to a different area, maybe they're trying to move closer to their grandchildren. Maybe one person passed away and they need to sell the house to pay for the nursing home. There could be just a plethora of reasons that there's motivation to sell the house. Your goal is to find your opportunity map and then go and market into those areas with some of the, you know, uh, with the idea that you're going to come in there with and talk to these motivated sellers about the cost of holding on instead of selling their property. When we're talking about motivated people, we're not talking about, talking someone into selling their house that has no intention of selling it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're looking for the motivated people, right? And then in another area of Dallas, we have areas of where there's more pockets of vacant properties, high rentals, that kind of thing. So again, you can find these demographics by Googling them. ChatGPT is a really good avenue to go in and do some research, Perplexity. So you can go in there and start creating your opportunity map. So, especially if you're newer to the business and you're just not really sure where to go for listings, right now there's more inventory on the market. So that means it's very competitive out there. It's very competitive for me to get a listing, for you to get a listing. So, that's why I like to create these opportunity areas so that I know, okay, if I find motivated sellers in this area, I have a very high chance of getting the listing because I'm coming at them not with, hey, we can get X number of dollars for your property, but B, I'm saving them X number of dollars per month once we move their property. So, in all my years of working with distressed sellers, here's what I can tell you. If you show up at the door, or you're calling them, or they're answering your marketing materials, and you just show up as a listing agent with a presentation on numbers and comps and things like that, you're going to have the door slammed in your face and or maybe politely declined. These sellers, these motivated sellers that I'm talking about, divorce, probate, pre-probate, foreclosure, tax liens, these folks are going through a very emotional time. They're stressed out, they're financially stressed, they're just stretched thin, and they have a lot of people knocking on their doors. So that's why I'm saying you have to bring more than just value. You have to bring, how are you going to solve their issue? How are you going to lift this burden from them? That's what we're really talking about. How are you going to set yourself apart from every other realtor that's approaching them? Not just to mention the realtors, but the investors. How are you going to set yourself apart with what you can offer the person? And that's why if you come with the idea that you're helping them, first of all, you're finding out what their problems are, what can you do to alleviate their burden in a compassionate and empathetic way. So I always talk about becoming my mantra now. You want to lead with empathy, not your wallet. So a lot of times when in the real estate sector, realtors, we're all guilty of it. I have been in times myself where, you just want to make that check, right? You need to produce some income, your family's relying on you, you need to pay your bills. So sometimes we get a little ahead of ourselves about what the client may need, what the prospective client might need. So what I'm saying is you need to take a breather, and then learn the skills to talk to folks that are under extreme duress emotionally. I've been working these type of leads for a very long time now. And this is what I've found out. If you want to scale your business, you cannot spend 90% of your time going through public records and hoping that the information is correct. So I have discovered a hidden inventory checklist, if you will, of how I want to get my information. So I kind of do it like this. I call it the 72-hour hidden inventory checklist, if you will. So I pull my list. Basically, every 3 days, I'm verifying equity. I'm taking time out of my day every day to verify the information. I send a problem solver. What I mean is, I'm sending some kind of marketing material that meets the needs of whatever list that I'm pulling. And then I schedule a consultative call, like a consult, if I'm saying it, consultative. That's a big word. So each step builds on the last. Now you can do a lot of this with social proof, so now because of what I've been doing and I speak about it, I partner with funeral homes. Who would have guessed I would have done that? So, but that's because of my work with people when someone has passed away recently, that's kind of become my niche is that I now can work with families who someone's passed away. There's a lot of emotionality going on. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. It's not the first thing in their mind, I need to sell the house. That's not what they're thinking. What they're thinking is, I have to clean out the house. I have to pay bills. They have a funeral to plan. There may be family coming in. There may be family issues. So you never know what it is. So a lot of times dealing with distressed people, like if it's foreclosure people, you have to act fast because there's a limited time amount. If you're dealing with probate or pre-probate, you have a little bit more time because now the time is dictated by the family's circumstances. So that's where you can make a difference. So let's talk about the problem first script framework. So standard agents, standard realtors will say, "Are you thinking of selling?" Okay, so that's what happens. People call, marketing material, "Are you thinking of selling?" And then the person says yes or no, right? The problem first consultants will go, "How much is this property costing you right now?" So a lot of times when people are, and if you can get them to focus on numbers, now again, you have to bring your empathy to it. You can't just go, "Okay, well, how much is it costing you?" You have to have a conversation. But I guess the difference is I want you to think about, okay, you're not just calling them up, "Hey, do you want to sell?" You're talking to them about what their course of action wants to be. What are their goals, especially if they've lost a loved one? They really don't know if they want to sell the house. Now, in some cases, maybe the person was, sick for a long time, so they know that that's what they're going to have to do. So you want to open with the cost, just the financial burden of keeping the house. And maybe right now that's not a burden, right? So most of the time though, if a parent has passed away, and there's kids involved and maybe the kids live out of town, this is generally the scenario I get. The Someone has passed away, the mom or dad. The kids are coming in to take care of the house. The house has deferred maintenance. They've lived there for a long time. And there's a lot of equity in the home. The kids don't really want to take the time or the money to fix up the house. Logistically, who's going to manage all the repairs? They just don't want to do that. Now, so that's one, right? And then you can be that bridge, right? You can position yourself as the connector. So maybe they do want to fix it up. Maybe there's enough meat on the bones, if you will, for them to get more money and they have the time, but they need you to help them with, you know, uh, getting the landscape or getting the house cleaned up, but you also have to kind of bring it back to them about the cost of all of that, like the cost of maintaining the home, the property insurance, the property taxes, because if the property is vacant and now there's going to be work on it, they need a different kind of insurance policy. So you need to make sure that you're bringing all that information to the family so they can make a decision based not on emotion at this point, but on the cost of, keeping mom or dad's house, that kind of thing. And then you want to close with clarity. And what do I mean by that? So you're going to identify and help them identify because they've told you, what their end goal is. What is it that they need to have happen? What actions? So you can literally have step by step. This is what I can do. This is what we need to do next. And then that way you can walk through it with them and look at the equity of the property, look at all of the things that are a benefit for them to sell in a financial situation in terms of, okay, if you hold the home, this is what it's going to cost. If you sell the home, this is what you gain. So you have to kind of look at all of those and be able to walk them through it. So why does this work in the DFW area? And I said specifically because I'm in the Dallas area, but literally I have friends that are doing this in Florida, in Colorado, in Oklahoma, and it's working for them too. So number one, we're working with people that there's a 90% probability that they're going to need to sell the house when they have these three big events, which is divorce, foreclosure, and death, which I'm going to just do probate and pre-probate. Tired landlords, I'm going to throw that one in there. And then, especially pre-probate and probate, there could be a longer window of time. Sometimes these leads take a little bit longer, but sometimes not. Like foreclosures doesn't take 180 days. But when you're working with people going through more of what I call the emotionality stress factors, the triggers, it does take a little bit longer just because the family needs to get all of their things in order. Not always. Normally, the properties that I have found when I work pre-probate specifically, I'm finding that there's like at least 50% plus equity in the house because it's an older person, it's an older neighborhood. Not saying that people don't pass away in newer neighborhoods, but I'm just saying when you work a certain opportunity map, that's what you're going to find. And my lead cost if I'm working just the public data records is zero. Now, I will say this, I actually, do get a list and I actually do market to it. So when I say zero, everything in my system that I can teach you, yes, you could do it for $0. But if you don't want to do any cold calling, then your cost is going to be about first class mail. So, you kind of have to look at how do you want to market to those leads, and that will dictate your cost. So, what I want to leave you with today is number one, I want you to stop competing with other realtors, with me, and start finding your own deals. And I have put together a free training, if you will. I call it the Hidden Inventory Generation Conversion System. And you can get all of my information about what kind of leads these are, how I work them, the scripts I use. You can also call me directly. There's my phone number there. Lastly, when we talk about claiming your territory, I have found working these leads that, if you work them right, that you can get 1 to 3 listings each and every month. Now that might not sound like a lot. Is that a way to say it? Like a lot. That's just one portion of the types of leads that you're going to get. And these leads, if you are working those kinds of leads, and if you double up what you're doing, then you could get, 6 to 9. So it really is dependent on how you market and how fast you want to travel. So if you want to get started, the link is below. And if you have any questions, reach out to me and I look forward to seeing the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. So I want to leave you with this. So what I have found over the years is that there's nothing that's free. And you probably know that by now too. So when you are a realtor and you're working in a large metropolitan area, there's a lot of competition for our business. So what I have found is kind of shortcuts to get there. So if you've stuck with me this far, thank you so much. But I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the hidden lead generation and conversion system that I have. And I'm actually giving that to you for free. You can download it. The link is down below. And you can start seeing the actual ways that I, number one, find these leads. What are they? What am I talking about? And some of the skill sets that you need to work them. It's not hard, but you do have to kind of put some effort into it. So with these leads, you don't have to cold call. That's what I probably love about them the best is that they are good leads and you get people to call you. So I prefer in my business to have motivated sellers call me so that I can like know that, okay, I'm going to close this deal because they called me. So I'm already 95% ahead of all of you because they've called me. And I have a unique selling proposition that I'm going to use with those sellers who call me. So they're motivated and I have a way for them to either sell their property or maybe they are looking for another avenue. They need a connector person, such as myself. Now, they can do listings, they can sell as is. The cool thing is that you and them get to decide what the final outcome of the property is going to be. So doesn't that sound fun? Like you have people calling you, you don't have to call them. So thanks so much. The link below for that free program is right there. And again, if you have any questions, you can always, all my contact is below as well. So thanks so much for watching and I'll see you next time.